You wanna G with the big boys. Like the wrong, get it, you the wrong, get the drink with the drop cup. Hey.
And General Townsend, just very briefly, do we see a lot of Russian activity in Africa and the use of contractors, military contractors, other types of contractors? And what are those contractors? And give us your assessment of whether that makes our job more difficult in Africa.
Thanks, Senator. We do see a lot of Russian activity. It's almost all in the form of these private military contractors that you're referring to, namely the Wagner Group and some other smaller ones. They're a malign influence. They don't follow anybody's rules. They do what they want. They buttress dictators. They do gross violations of human rights. I think it's bad for Africa's security and prosperity in the future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, again, thanks so much for your service. We truly do appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Senator Kane, please.
Mama, I'm a criminal. Mama, I'm a criminal. Mama, I'm a criminal, criminal, criminal. Mama, I'm a criminal. Mama, I'm a criminal. Mama, I'm a criminal, criminal, criminal.
As to the order, but thank you very much. That being said, gentlemen, Doctor, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate your time, appreciate your testimony. I'm going to focus it down to West Africa, obviously, and more particular in Mali especially. We know that the French came in back in 2013, Operation Barkhane. They had U.S. support. Unfortunately, now the French are leaving. Unfortunately, now there is a void. I don't have confidence in the 15,000 blue hats that are there on the ground to fill that void. I'm very skeptical of the Malian government to actually contract with the Wagner Group as well to do that. I know that we provided support in Operation Barkhane, and maybe this is a conversation we can have later this afternoon. But my question to you is, one, why are the French leaving? Two, who do you see filling that void? Three, why did they contract with the Wagner Group? And if you can go into that a little bit. And then my last question is, does China have a strategy? You have this nice map here that shows their involvement in Africa. Does China have a strategy to deal with the violent extremism in Africa?
Thanks, Congressman. First, the French aren't leaving. They are repositioning in West Africa. They are leaving, as you pointed out,
They're
in Mali.
coming to Niger, correct?
That's their plan is to go to Niger and Cote d'Ivoire and maybe a few other places. So they are repositioning their forces. You asked the question, why are they leaving? So in our interactions with the French, they had come to the realization that it was time to reset their campaign there and maybe gain new efficiencies. And so they had already made a decision, which the French government had announced, that they were going to reposition, reposture in West Africa. Then we had successive coups in Mali,
right.
And Mali, as you know, has invited in Wagner. I think they've invited in, that gets to your second question, why have they invited Wagner in? They've invited Wagner in because they believe that Wagner will replace the French and do a better job. When I learned of this, I traveled to Mali and I met with the president there, the junta president there, and I explained that I thought it was a bad idea to invite Wagner in because we've seen them, I have seen them in Syria, sure. And I've seen them in other places in Africa, and Wagner obeys no rules. They won't follow the direction of the government. They won't partner more effectively. I think they will only bring bad
Was
things.
he listening? Will he listen?
He told me that it wasn't Wagner, that they were dealing with the Russian Ministry of Defense. Except I think President Putin later said there are no Russian military in Mali. There are private military companies there, Wagner. So I think that only bad will come from that. I think there may be some initial gains. We're seeing Wagner deploy and build their base camps. They haven't really started significant operations yet. I think they've already suffered some casualties. I think
Casualties from violent extremism?
yes. I think that the only bad's going to come from their deployment there. You ask about China. We don't see China having a counter-violent extremist role. They are in Mali, though. They're there as part of, they have a substantial force there as part of MINUSMA, the UN mission there. But we don't see them doing, we see them doing a little bit of counterterrorism training on the continent, but we do not see them conducting any counter-VEO operations.
And a lot of our role then will be from Niger, is that correct, in regards to any sort of what we do?
We currently have forces in Niger, and I'm working with the Department of Defense on a strategy for West Africa that will take into account the French reposturing, that will take into account the malign actors like Wagner in the region.
And it sounds like you don't necessarily believe this Malayan official who you spoke to in regards to it was a Russian, organized Russian group. It was, you believe it's the Wagner group who's in there now.
It's the Wagner group supported by the Ministry of Defense and the Kremlin. The Russian Air Force flew them in.
Thank you. Once again, thank you. I yield back.
General Townsend, as you've mentioned in testimony, Russia has continued to encourage chaos in the Africom AOR via the Wagner Group. What has been done to counter their efforts, and what do you think needs to be continued to be done? So the Russian efforts, as I mentioned earlier, are predominantly done through these private military companies like Wagner, and they're present in Libya in number, to a lesser extent in Sudan. They essentially run the Central African Republic, and they're now in Mali and in gathering strength in Mali, over 1,000 Wagner operators there now. What we've been doing is shining a spotlight on that with information operations and some public diplomacy, and advising our African partners to try to steer clear of these groups. I think that they are not going to help our African partners, and I think that the government and the people of Mali are going to regret inviting Wagner into their country. As we speak, we have one military base in Africa. In your opinion, do we need two?
In my view, I don't believe we do need any other permanent U.S. installations. Our presence and our activities there is not dependent on permanent bases in Africa.
Okay, thank you.
General Townsend, I want to follow up on a question that Senator Tillis and Tuberville asked specifically about the Wagner Group. I know, that you share this committee's concern about the Russian illegal invasion of Ukraine, and our allies have come together to cut off Putin's support around the world and the influence that he has. And I'm really glad we've taken these strong measures. It's necessary, and we need to do more. But we also need to continue to monitor Russian-backed activity around the world. So specifically with regards to the Wagner Group in Africa, I find this increasing presence disturbing and affects our strategic goals in the area. So, General, specifically, how do you see the Wagner Group's activity impacting our efforts to, one, suppress violent extremist groups, and two, support a transition to democratic governance in the region?
Thanks, Senator. I think in a number of ways. First, for example, overflight permissions. So with a continent as vast as Africa, we absolutely depend on air movement for everything. And when you see Wagner move in, they impose overflight restrictions, either through the government withdrawing permissions for overflight, or in the case of Libya, Wagner importing sophisticated advanced surface-to-air missile systems to protect their activities there, but also deny the airspace. We can see some of this playing out in Mali as Wagner first started arriving there, and now overflight permissions are becoming more challenging there. Then secondly, usurping partnerships. So as we've seen, and just happened just now in Mali, the Malian government has asked the French forces to depart and instead have invited in this Russian PMC. And I think that is disturbing. It's impacting our partnership with that same government as well. And I think that's not good for Mali's future.
And what do you think the strategic goals that they might be advancing for Russian leadership would be? Like, what's the overall goal here?
So for Wagner, they are guns for hire. They're a for-profit organization, and they are going to be extracting natural resources out of Africa. And we see this in all the countries that they're located in, whether it's oil, gas, gold, diamonds, strategic minerals. That's what they're going to be going after, and that's how they're probably going to earn their remittance. But at what they're doing for the Kremlin, though, is they're usurping those partnerships. They're displacing Western influence, like France, for example, in Mali. And I think that's what they're trying to block us out, and Wagner's trying to make a profit while they do it.
And it sounds like they're being somewhat successful. So what do we need to be doing? What kind of changes do we need to make, either alone or with our partners, to counter this expanding Russian influence in the region?
Senator, despite their recent gain or success in Mali, and I think that remains to be seen whether they're going to be successful there or not. I predict they will not be successful in the long run. An example, though, is in Libya, where they have worn out their welcome there, and the Libyans, even the Libyans who the Russians supported in the civil war, now want them to depart. So actually, I think that they're probably their own worst enemy.
So the Libyan people are now against this, I don't want to call it an occupation, but this force being there and amongst the community. It seems that in Mali, they do have support, general support from the public. Do you see that turning at some point?
I do, and I think we're in their very early stages. They've only been arriving in the last couple of months, and they're preparing to get under operations. So I think that I think they will wear out their welcome. I do believe that.
Thank you, General.